Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the 2021 IFIE Caribbean Working Group, I want to welcome you to our regional webinar titled Strengthening Our Toolkit to Fight Impacts of Financial Fraud During the COVID-19 Pandemic. I will put on my slide. Let me share the content. Yes. Everyone can see my screen? Yep. Okay. Yes. So just to explain a little bit about the Caribbean Working Group, the Caribbean Working Group leaders of 16 countries have worked together to strengthen resources for the financial resilience and investor education programs and strategies since 2014. This webinar is in honor of IOSCO World Investor Week 2021 and aims to share our efforts to continue to serve the region and fight financial fraud and scams during this very stressful COVID-19 pandemic that has affected us all. This webinar is hosted for the region by the Central Bank of Curacao and Sint Maarten. The Central Bank is proud to support efforts to strengthen strategies and programs for financial capability, financial resilience, and investor education, serving individuals, their families, communities across the region, as well as within Curacao and Sint Maarten. My name is Ali Muskit, and I will be your moderator for today. We are extremely pleased to bring you this webinar on these important issues. We thank the Central Bank of Curacao and Sint Maarten and the two co-chairs of the Caribbean Working Group, Mr. Errol Kova from Curacao and Stuart Miller from Bahamas, as well as the leaders of the other 14 member countries, many of which are sharing their work and innovations as our speakers during our time together today. We also thank IOSCO and celebrate this 5th time they have hosted World Investor Week. Today, we will have 5 speakers in total. The first speaker that we have today is my colleague, Errol Kova. Errol Kova is employed at the Central Bank of Curacao and Sint Maarten. Oops, going back. And is currently the head of the Actor Supervision Department. Just minimize something. Okay, so that entails governance, compliance, and conduct supervision. Mr. Kova has over 20 years of experience in the financial services supervisory sector, including assisting with the mutual evaluation of the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force and the peer review on the Global Forum of Transparency and Exchange of Information of the OECD for both Curacao and Sint Maarten. Errol also chairs the innovation platform of the CBCS, which functions as an innovation hub and advisory body to the executive board of the CBCS. Additionally, Errol heads the fraud team and is the CBCS representative on the IFIE Global Board. As of January 1st this year, Mr. Kova is the transitional acting chair of the IFIE Global Forum. Next, we have Ms. Alusha Faisal. She is a financial services professional with 30 years of experience in the financial services sector in the ECCU, with more than 15 years in financial regulation and supervision. Ms. Faisal holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Management Studies with first-class honors from the University of West Indies, a master's degree in Business Administration, and from the University of Durham in the United Kingdom. She is a member of the Association of Certified Anti-Money Laundering Specialists, so ACAMS, and is a certified anti-money laundering specialist. Alusha is currently employed as the CEO of the Eastern Caribbean Securities Regulatory Commission and currently manages the operations of the EC-SRC Secretariat. After Alicia, we will have Ms. Ellen Lewis. She has been employed with the Trinidad and Tobago Securities and Exchange Commission for the past 2 years and is presently Manager of Corporate Communication and Education. She is responsible for leading and guiding the Commission's communication, public relations, and investor education initiatives. Prior to the TTSEC, Ellen was the head of corporate communications at the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and was instrumental in spearheading the Commission's fraud awareness campaign and the recent development and launch of its investor protection mobile application. Alan has extensive and broad-based experience in media, strategic communications, digital marketing, and project leadership. Then we will have Stuart Miller. Mr. Stuart Miller manages the Investor Education Communications Unit of the Office of the Executive Director of the Securities Commission of the Bahamas, where he has been employed in the various capacities over the last 10 years. Prior to joining the commission, Stuart worked for over a decade in the private sector of the wealth management industry in capacities including relationship management and business development. After Stuart, we will have Wayne Worth. Wayne is an attorney at law by profession. In October 1999, he was called to the Bahamas Bar after receiving his undergraduate law degree from the University of the West Indies and legal education certificate from the Norman Manley Law School. Worth has been employed with the Securities Commission of the Bahamas for the last 15 years in various capacities. Presently, he is the senior manager of the Enforcement Department, which primarily implements disciplinary actions pursuant to laws administered by the Securities Commission. In addition, the department defends the Securities Commission in litigation matters and, where deemed necessary, initiates litigation to enforce law administered by the Commission. Yes, so we thank you all for your contribution for today's webinar and working together, and we wish you much success during your program today. As I already mentioned, we would like to have the questions at the end of the program, so after the presentations, and every question should be posed then through the chat box. We will try to answer as many questions as possible, depending on the time we have left at the end of our webinar. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor now to our first speaker, Mr. Errol Kova. He is also my colleague, and I'm pleased to turn the program over to him. Errol, the floor is yours. Yes. Can you all see Errol's screen?
Yes, Ali, we can see his. Oh, it just went off.
Yeah.
Yeah. But not the correct version, correct. Yeah. No, I don't know. Let's start with this rules.
Yes, I'm here. You know, I was trying to upload my presentation. So let me start by, providing you with an introduction and welcome as the chairman of the IFIE, which of course stands for the International Forum for Investor Education. And as chairman of the global IFIE and co-chair of the IFIE Caribbean Working Group, I want to welcome you on behalf of all of us in the IFIE Caribbean Working Group to this 5th annual celebration of IOSCO's World Investor Week 2021. I want to thank my colleagues and the Central Bank of Curacao and St. Maarten for hosting and recording this webinar to support the Caribbean-wide investor and financial education initiative. To provide a short overview of the IFIE Caribbean Working Group, the IFIE Caribbean Working Group consists of 16 member countries in the Caribbean represented by their respective regulatory authority, namely the Securities Commission of the Bahamas, Barbados Financial Services Commission, the British Virgin Islands Financial Services Commission, the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority, the Central Bank of Curacao and St. Maarten, the Dominican Republic Securities Commission, the Eastern Caribbean Securities Regulatory Commission, comprising, of course, of 8 Eastern Caribbean jurisdictions, Jamaica, the Jamaican Financial Services Commission, and of course, our colleagues from Trinidad and Tobago Securities and Exchange Commission. This regional group meets virtually every 3 weeks and at least once a year, face-to-face for additional meetings and trainings with a purpose of developing financial capability and investor education resources, strategies, and programs to strengthen financial resilience in our region. The Caribbean Working Group started, as Ellie already alluded to, in 2014 at the IFIE IOSCO Global Investor Education Conference as a critical component of regional and market work streams to serve our regional needs. We bring together securities regulators, super regulators, central banks, exchanges, program providers, and other stakeholders as needed to focus on implementation of investor literacy, education, and protection initiatives. The Caribbean Working Group uses IOSCO's annual World Investor Week observance to initiate joint programming and strategies that can strengthen our financial resilience and investor education work, not just for the 1 week, but for the entire year. So this webinar kicks off our work led by the IFIE in honor of IOSCO's World Investor Week leadership to develop multifaceted initiatives to build educational and financial resilience and capacity in economies and markets to serve our region and individual investors in relevant and effective ways. So in this way, what we do in 2022 will be stronger and we hope more effective than what was done this year. I again, on behalf of all the 16 Caribbean jurisdictions that form part of this working group, want to welcome you to this regional webinar and trust that you will leave today with not only an overview of our regional challenges, but more importantly, with approaches and solutions to those challenges. I will kick off this webinar with a general overview about what we have been seeing related to frauds and fraudulent ways to sometimes perfectly legal schemes. So this webinar, and certainly my dissertation, will be focused on regional experiences. The webinar will then be capped off with 3 case studies on how the Caribbean region has been and is innovatively dealing with the multiple challenges to keep our capital markets transparent and sound while protecting and educating retail investors and the investing public at large. So my presentation, I had a slide to give you an overview of the topics of my presentation, but I'm going to provide you with an overview, a narrative of what I call the anatomy of fraud types. So I'm going to talk about the anatomy of fraud types, during which I want to explore the different fraudulent schemes and workings that we have been experiencing in our region. Since the theme of this year's World Investor Week is related to the ways that all of us, regulators, central banks, deliverers of programs on financial resiliency and investor education, as well as individuals, can build better tools and strategies to fight financial fraud and scams and detect and defeat financial fraudsters and scammers, I was asked, but also tasked, to provide you with a contextual overview of what we are observing in terms of frauds and scams in the terrible context of this COVID pandemic. So concurrently, we want to share with you how we are working across the Caribbean region on finding ways to protect investors and empower investors to protect themselves. Given the time I have, my summary will be exactly that, a summary, and in no way encapsulate everything what we saw or detected in the past 20 months. After my overview, my colleagues will highlight some innovative ways to respond to this environment, assist individuals, and contribute observations about communicating to be heard. I thank all of our Caribbean Working Group 16 member countries, our speakers and colleagues from the rest of the members contributing important work and insights, for me to be able to present, a summary of this. Okay, as you might already know or not, I've been in charge of investment fraud detection and prevention for some years now at the Central Bank. Fraud and fraudulent activities is always a present force in and around capital markets, especially during times of economic stagnation, downturn, and crises. Individuals are more inclined to, one, try to make easy money, or two, make up lost income. So during the still ongoing pandemic, we have seen many traditional fraudulent offerings, pyramid-like schemes, and other COVID-19 related scams being promoted using the COVID-19 situation as a cover to victimize unsuspecting or vulnerable persons. I want to pause to a valid observation from our colleagues in the region. There is always a segment of fraud that we have seen before, but applied to a new problem or situation. So fraudsters and scammers always find new ways to be creative, topical, relevant, plausible to defraud individuals or take advantage of those who are already vulnerable or experiencing traumatic disruption in their lives. The last 20 months have been no different, with even more distinctive categories of fraud and scams in the region because of the devastation of the pandemic and the waves of impact on individuals and their families, small businesses, and communities. In general, we are observing uncertainty about the course of our economies, new ways of doing things, what we call the new normal, which are also affecting economic and market structures. So this context of uncertainty and the challenges we all face in feeling we have less control and agency exacerbate the complexities of trying to help our region weather the crisis and continue to build resilient markets and economies. So the first type of frauds and scams we have seen, in parts of the Caribbean, especially our region, are what we tend to categorize as damaging financial capability or financial resiliency of our economies and individuals and our families. This sort of, we can recategorize those in three sections. First, as part of that first category of scams, you have scams and frauds related to people dealing with or paying for direct physical impacts of COVID, including fraudulent or ineffective treatments for those already ill. Second, we saw a lot of fraud and scams related to people with emergency needs during or after any crisis or disruption, such as the need to pay for property damage or find supplies and services in the post-disaster period. Third, the financial frauds and scams that can come from those trying to mislead or cheat individuals in context of their trying to operate their financial businesses remotely. Examples hereof are stealing account information from people, forced to remotely handle their finances, use different non-cash solutions, purchase healthcare goods, or even getting loans online to cover for damages caused by any disaster. So know that small businesses and other community entities may be operating in ways differently than they are used to. So needing products and services that are not familiar with or from different vendors. So all of these areas of our economies and markets can be opportunities for fraudsters to mislead, cheat, defraud, or scam unsuspecting victims without a need to even have the risk of being identified. Okay, so the second types of fraud we are seeing are those frauds that impact multiple parts of the region or jump from one island to the other, impacting market-based financing, using COVID or other disasters under the cover of social assistance for the needy or recovery purposes. Here we are detecting pump and dump like schemes, phishing scams, pyramid schemes, and Ponzi schemes. Especially pyramid schemes and Ponzi schemes that in particular can destroy one's financial situation relatively quick and yet can be very difficult for individuals to detect. The characteristics of these offerings or schemes are that they rely on the recruitment of new participants to keep money flowing into these schemes. Most of the time, there are no products sold or real investment made to create a purported value or profits. And once these schemes run out of new recruits, the structure collapses, resulting in the loss of money for the latest entrants. Very interesting here is the collective damage these structures or these failures cause, because as a result of recruitment, mostly from within the victim's inner circle, can have direct and lasting impact not only on one person, but on entire families, communities, and affinity organizations. Sometimes when you think that you're getting a blessing circle, you might be actually setting yourself up for a tough ride. And yes, the pun was intentionally intended, yes. So one notable development vulnerable to all types of fraud and scams is a group referred to as the Generation COVID. Those young individuals unused to the new environment, whether for purchase or delivery, or as a replacement for their usual face-to-face interactions in educational settings. Some fraudsters are targeting these youngsters in new and creative ways. Although I do not have enough time to go over every provision individuals and communities can make to protect themselves at the highest level, we would say that digital literacy, especially digital security, is of relevant importance. The trend of influencing and sharing on social media adds to the challenge of one of the most important tools of protecting oneself, that includes the discouragement to individuals from sharing all information, especially personal and financial information. Encouraging individuals to be aware and think carefully about what they share online, since information can be accessed for fraudulent purposes, makes our task as regulatory authorities super or extra daunting. It should also be reminded that fraudsters have targeted small businesses and remote setups for workplaces, so creating awareness about verifying before clicking on links supposedly related to one's work or workplace is very necessary. The third area is an area that is a difficult area because of how complex this type of behavior is. So the third area of our markets and economies where we have noticed vulnerabilities to fraudulent actions rather than the fraudulent schemes themselves is more complex and potentially difficult to sort, because these may seem to be scams, but may not actually be a fraud, but rather a loss of principal or an investment not suitable for the person who made it. So the pandemic hit just when our markets were experiencing new innovative and transformational offerings. Many of these considered under the title of fintech or decentralized finance. The key in this area is that there are new financial products and services that we are seeing younger and individuals new to investing, or even more experienced investors who do not usually use remote or digital platforms, using platforms and investing in alternative investment opportunities that may not be suitable to them or are too complex for basic retail investors. The so-called virtual advisors who make profits off investors that are now more keen to invest in these new technologies and opportunities encourage investors to act in different ways, especially even acting against their investment profile that end up damaging them or causing loss of investment principal. Note that some of these investors are looking for different ways to what is trending. So one of the next presenters will delve into communications with investors and different media strategies to interact with and educate these investors. And hopefully we can do that more effectively than how the fraudsters do that. So it is still not clear how many of these new financial or investment products and services work and how they will be regulated in the near future. The only certainty is that they will impact the dynamics of the financial and market systems. Since we are still in the early days and different markets and jurisdictions have different strategies and approaches to this innovative offerings, I will highlight two only as a way to provide insights in the intricacies we are facing as regulators. The first area is cryptocurrencies or crypto assets and the use of blockchain technologies in the decentralized finance space. Although different parts of the global financial system set different regulatory thresholds to deter fraud and misuse, the collective point is that in general, it is very important for individuals investing in the crypto space that they first try to understand what they are investing in, the degrees of regulation in the space, and the suitability of investing in these new opportunities that may have an increased potential for fraud and misuse, especially in unregulated or lightly regulated markets. The second area is one that was highlighted earlier this year related to digital engagement practices. Among the issues here is how behavioral design in interactive digital interface investing platforms may impact how investors use interface and how they behave when they invest through these platforms, which may have features that encourage more trading and or influence time, attention, and activity, including in a more of a gamification framework. So I've tried to point out the great complexities we face in the context of the work we are conducting to educate individual investors and put in place regulations to protect investors not only against fraud and fraudulent schemes, but to educate the public about misleading offerings of legal products that may have the same effect on them as fraudulent offerings, and especially to educate them on improving their skills and knowledge. As you could hear, and we'll be receiving further insights on this, we and our colleagues in the region will continue to work together regionally to understand these issues and complexities, and hopefully find effective ways to keep our markets transparent and sound while protecting investors and educating the market with the objective to create a common, resilient mindset. I will now turn it over to our hostess, Ellie, to introduce the next presenters that will share some short case studies on innovations developed to address some of the challenges I have highlighted. So thank you very much to be participating at this webinar. And Ellie, I give you back the floor.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you very much for this interesting information. And I would like to remind everyone as well, if you have questions, please send them through the chat box. We will try to answer all of them by the end of the presentations. Okay, so in the next session, there will be 3 case studies presented on how the region is dealing in innovative ways with the challenges to help protect and educate the retail investors and the investing public at large. Our next speaker is Alusha Faisal. Alusha Faisal will give us a sense of how the Eastern Caribbean is working to strengthen individual investor capacity to participate in strong and fair financial markets across jurisdictional boundaries. Alusha, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ellie. Good afternoon to my fellow regulators and good afternoon to the audience. It is my pleasure to represent the Eastern Caribbean Securities Regulatory Commission at this very timely and informative webinar today. The focus of my presentation will be on the role of the ECSRC in investor protection. What we aim to do is to empower our investors and also to assist them in building resilience. The Eastern Caribbean Securities Regulatory Commission, ECSRC for short, is the Securities Market Regulatory Authority for the Eastern Caribbean Securities Market, ECSM. The ECSM is a regional integrated securities market developed by the participating governments of the 8 member countries of the Innovative Monetary Union, the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union. The member governments are the governments of the countries of Anguilla, Antigua and Barbuda, the Commonwealth of Dominica, Grenada, Montserrat, St. Christopher and Nevis, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. These countries are also served by the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, ECCB, which is a regional monetary authority established by agreement among the member countries. The main objective of the ECCB is to maintain the stability of the Eastern Caribbean dollar and the integrity of the banking system. One of the mandates of the ECSRC is to develop and strengthen the financial markets and financial ecosystem in the ECCU, to build resilience and to meet the future needs of the countries and people of the region. As a further affirmation of our approach to regionalism and integration, not just among ourselves in the ECCU, but also with our counterparts in the wider CARICOM member countries, this year, the ECSRC assumed the chairmanship of the Caribbean Group of Securities Regulators. This role also mirrors the commitment from the ECSRC and the ECCB to empower and strengthen the ability of our region to build financial and economic strengths and to collectively work towards meeting and overcoming our issues and challenges. The ECSRC is pleased to be a part of the International Forum of Investor Education, the IFIE Caribbean Working Group event, in recognition of IOSCO's World Investor Week 2021. Over the years, and particularly over the last 3 to 5 years, the ECSRC has engaged in a number of activities to strengthen the financial markets and economic resources available for our 8-country region, and to support, empower, and protect individual investors, including against emerging fraud and scams. I now highlight 3 of these initiatives. Firstly, the ECSRC is committed to strengthening financial markets and economies to provide fair and equitable ways to invest and protect, educate, and strengthen financial resiliency of individuals and their communities. Consistent with this vision, the ECSRC's efforts and initiatives seek to promote an environment that will facilitate the growth and development of the securities market. This is critical as more and more persons, those who are new to investing as well as those who are trying to learn more about new ways of investing and investment products, show increased interest in the securities market. As regulators, we must work to create access to the securities market and to maintain that interest, particularly among our youth. And in this way, we can assist in building resilience in our communities. The ECSRC has made significant strides, most notably in the revision of the key ECSM legislation to ensure that the ECSM operates within a robust yet facilitative regulatory framework that protects investors and is also compliant with international standards. The securities market regulatory framework must not only be able to address emerging issues, but it must also assist in the development of financial and economic systems in the currency union that will ultimately result in stronger institutional frameworks that can assist the member countries manage through and recover from the impacts of, for example, natural disasters and climate change. These institutional frameworks must also create resiliency and strength for unforeseen financial issues that might not have started in the financial setting, for example, the COVID-19 pandemic. These challenges can have a significant economic impact on the region, both to our citizens and to our tourism-dependent economies. In this way, we can help the citizens and residents of the ECCU member countries to anticipate and better prepare for financial shocks, and in so doing, build financial resiliency. The new revised securities legislation offers all of these opportunities. Secondly, the ECSRC uses these efforts to help people engage in the future of their communities and region and their families, such as through the ECSM, by creating a facilitative environment that will allow greater access to finance and ensure that investors in these businesses can do so with confidence. ECSRC works internally to understand current and emerging financial issues to help countries and empower investors, including individuals and communities, to be more prepared and able to deal with financial challenges and opportunities. In 2020, the Commission considered and approved a draft framework that would permit the conduct of crowdfunding in the ECSM. It is anticipated that this would promote not only a safe regulatory and supervisory environment for the use of innovative technologies in investing and raising capital, particularly for small and medium-sized enterprises, but would also build investor confidence in using fintech as a means to invest. We are aware that we encourage greater use of fintech, that with the greater use of fintech, comes the responsibility to educate the public, to reinforce their understanding, and to help them to protect themselves from investment fraud and financial scams. Thirdly, the ECSRC works to support the use of digital infrastructure throughout the member countries, particularly during this COVID-19 pandemic. We also aim to understand how countries and individuals or institutions are using the digital innovations in fintech and how these new products and services work and will need to be integrated into the securities markets. Going forward, the ECSRC will be seeking to implement more focused strategies to increase investor participation in the ECSM, while also creating a safe regulatory and supervisory space that would foster the use of fintech and innovations in the capital markets in the ECCU. Consistent with this new strategic focus, the Commission approved the implementation of a fintech regulatory sandbox for the ECSM. This initiative would allow for the testing of emerging innovative approaches in the financial markets utilizing fintech to understand how they fit in to serve and protect individual investors in the region. It will also assist the ECSRC in fulfilling its mandate to protect investors while it works to develop an appropriate legislative and supervisory framework to regulate and supervise market activities and products that utilize fintech. This regulatory sandbox will allow the ECSRC to be a more proactive and responsive securities regulator by 1, closely monitoring fintech innovations and using the sandbox to be sure these innovations work and are safe and have effective provisions to protect investors and or work fairly and equitably in the financial and economic market system that the ECSRC and its partners are envisioning for the region. 2, ensuring that digital access is distributed fairly, particularly access for youth as well as new first-time investors. Reducing the number of persons that fall victim to fraud, and lastly, mitigating other risks involving these types of activities by implementing appropriate responses to developments in this type of securities business activity as these unfold, to keep the ECSRC as one of the key institutions continuing to have as its mission to protect individual investors and also help them to protect themselves as they use individual financial products and services. The rules and other procedures for the functioning of this regulatory sandbox are currently under development, and we anticipate that this would be in operation during 2022. In conclusion, I wish to take time to congratulate the ECSM and its key market institutions on the achievement of 20 years in operation. This symbolic event was celebrated on the 19th of October 2021 under the theme, Celebrating 20 Years of Facilitating, Protecting, and Compounding the Wealth of ECCU Citizens. The ECSM was meant to serve as an opening to greater participation and inclusiveness in our economic systems, both within the ECCU member countries and across the currency union, and also to contribute to building wealth and resilience. The ECSRC views its role of investor protection as critical to maintaining confidence in and the stability of the capital markets in the ECCU. Increased levels of market participation by both new, young, and different kinds of investors would attest to our successes. Investor education and awareness is also key. Therefore, the ECSRC has developed a number of educational videos for the market and has partnered with the ECCB on activities to promote financial literacy. Also, through our participation as members of the IFIE Caribbean Working Group, we hope to increase investor education and build financial capacity among the population in the ECCU member countries. However, investors too have a responsibility to ensure that they take the necessary steps to protect themselves from investment and financial fraud. We take this opportunity to remind the investing public to pay attention to internet security and privacy issues, and also to educate themselves before they invest in financial products and services. The ECSRC and the CGSR are committed to working with other colleagues, such as the IFIE Caribbean Working Group, and you, to build our financial defenses against financial fraud and to also build resiliency. Finally, as I conclude my presentation, I invite you to view a short video created by the ECSRC for the ECCU, which highlights some of the red flags of investing and how you can fight being defrauded and scammed.
We at ECSRC realize that these are hard times for everyone. And recently, we have seen a rise in the incidences of persons being scammed by sneaky characters, often posing as supposedly successful investors. They invite you to meetings, maybe even offer a free meal, and then pressure you into being part of a scheme to make money fast and easy, with no risk. And so often, many lose their hard-earned funds and cause people who trusted in them to lose their precious monies too. Reputations damaged permanently. But there are ways to protect you and your loved ones from these schemes. Firstly, there is no such thing as a high returns, no risk investment. Easy money does not exist. Secondly, if someone pressures you to make a snap decision with promises but no proof, that's your first red flag. Take your time and research the plan and the person, no matter how well you think you know them. They are likely a victim too, but believe what they are saying. Another big red flag is when the only way the scheme pays out is by you bringing other people to pay in. The last people coming in will lose their money, and that might be you. Beware the group plans. Some even specially target religious groups to appear legitimate. It's the halo effect. You believe them, so you trust them, and you feel ashamed to ask pertinent questions. No. Look past the halo. If you have a question or concern about an investment, or you think you have encountered one of these frauds or scams, please contact the ECSRC. Report the fraud and become informed to protect yourselves and loved ones. ECSRC, protecting investors, building our future.
Thank you very much, Ellie, and everyone for your attention.
Thank you so much, Alicia. Very interesting and very nice video. So the insights provided to all of us. Our next speaker will be Ellen Lewis from TTSEC, and she will present to us also a topic on innovations.
Thank you, Ellie. I would now share my screen. Our usual disclaimer about presentations. My presentation focuses on the TTSEC's Investor Protection mobile application, strengthening our toolkit to fight the impacts of financial fraud during the COVID-19 pandemic. Under the laws of Trinidad and Tobago, in particular, the Securities Act, Chapter 8302. The TTSEC is mandated to provide protection to investors from unfair, improper, fraudulent practices foster fair and efficient securities markets and confidence in securities industry in Trinidad and Tobago, to reduce systemic risk and for other related matters. Section 6 of the Act further mandates that educate and promote an understanding by the public of the securities industry and the benefits and liabilities associated with investing in securities. In terms of scope, International Organization of Securities Commission, the global standard setter for the security sector, it recognizes the importance of investor education and guiding principles of securities regulation. And in January 2021, the Board of ERSCO published a report that sets forth 9 sound practices of SPS aimed at assisting its members in developing and improving their complaint handling procedures and mechanisms for retail investors. Investor protection is a key objective of ERSCO and securities regulators worldwide. In addition to satisfying our obligations under our local laws, the investor protection mobile application is directly aligned to 5 of the 9 sound practices which are highlighted. In particular, SP3, making available as many channels as possible for retail investors to submit complaints, along with the other sound practices identified here for current purposes. The situation that faces Trinidad and indeed other Caribbean countries within the Caribbean basin due to the impacts of COVID-19 are quite similar. In Trinidad and Tobago, we witnessed an increased vulnerability of consumers to investment fraud, job losses, a rise in promotion of investment scams targeting users on social media. We have a high population of social media users, 140,000 to be exact, and a retail investing public numbering 750,000. Given the scenarios outlined, we needed to introduce a solution to combat investment fraud at the intersection where the fraudulent offerings and a vulnerable public connected, which of course was online. We needed as well to effectively strengthen our toolkit to fight the impact of financial fraud during this pandemic. And we saw the introduction of the mobile application as one of the ways to achieve this. The question for us at the TTSEC: how do we better protect consumers? How do we facilitate a more expedient form of access to better combat the various types of online scams? The decision was therefore taken to introduce a mobile app to enable the ease of submission of complaints by investors and receipt of information on investment scams by members of the public. Interestingly, this country had its first confirmed case of the coronavirus in March 2020. The collective investment scheme industry, assets under management, stood at the time at $54 billion. But as of September 2021, our assets under management stood at $62.2 billion, which shows an increase, pointing to investor confidence in the market and growth in the retail investing public. Now look at the app in particular. The TTSEC Investor Protection App was developed over an 8-month period and launched just 2 months ago on August 8th. Generally, what you would see on an app of this nature, a welcome page. Now, the key features of the app, which I will highlight and speak to, of course, we have, you can submit complaints via the app in addition to via our website, which is our standard complaint mechanism. You can go ahead with correspondence to the SEC by email or by telephone. Report a scam. This is a key and important feature for us and a particular focus for us at this time. The user can now anonymously submit information about alleged investment scams to TTSEC. That is, images, documents, video and audio files can be uploaded via the app. You can also find information on the app, investor tips, we conduct polls, general glossary of terms. And of course, we focus as well on investment fraud, different types of investment fraud. Here, we will find a complete database of all registrants authorized to conduct business in Trinidad and Tobago. The investor bot. This bot is intended to assist the user navigating or finding his way around the app. This is to ensure a stress-free experience when interacting with the commission via this channel. Investment fraud awareness, again, here is where you learn more about different types of fraud that are existing in the environment. And as pointed out by Kuba earlier, as well by Alicia, at this time, given the financial stress is ongoing experience by individuals, persons are becoming vulnerable to different forms of scams being targeted towards them. Or standard complaint procedure. And this mirrors what is obtained on our website. Report a scam page in itself. We now have a brief demonstration, which my colleague, Rachel Jennings, will take us through. What has been explained in the process demonstration is that it's a simple process. You simply enter the app, you go into the photo scan page, and you follow the directions. You upload either your audio, video, files, or documents. And after you submit the documents to us, we will confirm receipt and engage you subsequently. Once it's anonymous, of course, we cannot do so. But the intention is for us to be able to follow up on the matter and to address it as soon as possible. During the course of the development of the Investor Protection Act, what we sought to do initially was to ascertain whether or not there was any existing app of similar type within the region. Our initial research indicated to us that no such app that was available to us to benchmark against it. After we completed the launch, we engaged, of course, our counterpart in IFIE and our own research department to determine what obtained outside. What we determined is that CBCS is one of only 3 securities regulators within our scope to introduce the use of a mobile application to combat fraud and scams. The Securities and Exchange Board of India introduced its app in 2011, and France EMF did so in 2019. So we are indeed, in this part of the world, seeking to ensure we use technology to advance the interests of the investor, to ensure we connect with them at the point at which he requires or engagement most. We have established that at this particular time, there are scam artists, there are fraudsters actively engaged online, seeking to attract unsuspecting persons, to have them involve themselves, to put their hard-earned money into suspicious and dubious offerings. And so therefore the regulator, we have a duty and obligation required by the law to ensure the investor is aware of what to look out for. What are the red flags? What are the signs? What should you alert yourself to, and therefore, in considering what is before you, should you, having received of all the information, make that particular investment? Of course, the intention here is, if it comes to you on social media, it sounds too good to be true, then clearly and obviously, you ought not to invest any sums whatsoever in such an offering promoted to you online. We would have launched, as we have said, the app a couple of months ago. Some information material has been utilized. We have created ads that will appear on television, on radio, on social media, the print media. At the time, of course, we can show you those really amazing ads that the teams put together. These are some of the brochures and flyers that would have been used to promote the app and to ensure that the public was aware of its availability and how to go about using the app for their benefit. Again, the promotional material is on our website. What has been the impact of the app since the introduction a couple of months ago? What you would have seen as of September of this year is that the app is already performing very well, given its nature. It has been downloaded 281 times from users in United States, Canada, of course, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries around the world. In terms of Google app, that is App Play Store, 216 times. And again, persons, users in Asia Pacific, Africa, the Middle East, India, Europe, the USA, Canada, Latin America, and Caribbean, of course, being the major users of this app so far. So many complaints that we've been receiving. So many complaints coming in so far, common and general types of complaints, has to do with investment schemes, unregistered securities and so on, broker-dealer trading activities, unauthorized transactions on clients' accounts, cryptocurrency and forex trading. As it pertains to the common type of scam reports we receive via the app, it has to do as to be expected with Ponzi and pyramid type schemes involving the purchase and sale of cryptocurrencies and possible unregistered securities. Thank you, Illy, and that is my presentation.
Thank you very much, Alan. I think I can speak on behalf of us all when I say that we're very excited about this app development and looking forward to everything about it. So I would like to introduce our next speakers. We have our colleagues from the Securities Commission of the Bahamas who are going to do a joint presentation to brief you on the frauds and scams, so a legislative approach to deterrence. So the discussion will be of the Bahamas to move to protect investors from the ever-present danger of frauds and scams via the introduction of cutting-edge legislation to criminalize fraudulent financial schemes, including pyramids, Ponzi's, and advanced fee fraud. Our next speakers are Stuart Miller and Gwen Ward.
Thanks so much, Ellie, and good afternoon to my colleagues, ladies and gentlemen throughout the Caribbean. First, while I'm setting us up, Gwen's going to get the slide presentation going, and while he gets the slide presentation going, just let me issue the standard disclaimer that the views that are about to be expressed are those of the presenters. They are not the views, they're not necessarily the views of the Securities Commission of the Bahamas. So as everyone has pointed out, frauds and scams are truly an ever-present danger. And the COVID-19 pandemic and ensuing economic crisis, coupled with a plethora of messages, information, misinformation, disinformation, have proven a fertile landscape for frauds and scams to flourish in 2020, in the region and globally. In fact, our neighbors to the north, the US Federal Trade Commission reported receiving 2.2 million fraud reports from consumers in 2020, representing about $3.8 billion in losses from fraud. And although the Bahamas, of course, things operate on a smaller scale here, we had a remarkable year for frauds and scams as well in 2020, as everyone through the region has seen as well. In the Bahamas, we launched more than 20 investigations, which was significantly up from previous years. The Bahamas took the bold step of taking legislative measures to formally criminalize certain fraudulent financial schemes. And we're going to turn now to the Securities Commission of the Bahamas' Senior Enforcement Manager, Mr. Gwen Ward, to share about this legislative initiative, and in particular to answer the questions of, well, what was the impetus for the decision? What is a fraudulent financial scheme? How does the law capture them? Who's liable? What the deterrents are that are provided for in the legislation, and how the implementation is progressing. So without delay, because I know we are falling behind in time as well, but without delay, I turn now to my colleague, Mr. Ward.
Thank you very much, Stuart, for your astute remarks, which actually helps me with one or two of the subsequent slides. I won't have to say much on them, and that will indeed save us some time. And so, continuing with the impetus for our decision, we will note from our next slide, these more prevalent frauds or scams, which you've already heard about, so I have no need to go through them. They are there. Suffice to say, we are all vulnerable to being scammed, whether as the victim or becoming the scammer. That is, the person who perpetrates or perpetuates a fraud on another. We can be both, victim and scammer. And an example of this is where we may start out as the victim by being conned perhaps into joining a scheme, multi-level marketing perhaps. Then we invite and encourage others to join. And at some point we become the scammer because we become aware that if these other people don't join, we may not get our money back. We also know they will lose their money if they do join, and they'll lose it because of you who brought them in. So in those circumstances, who is liable? What are the potential consequences for a person who, whether intentional or not, moves from being scammed or the victim to being the scammer or the offender? We'll answer these questions a little further on. And so, still looking at the impetus, here are some statistics involving commission investigations. As Stuart would have earlier mentioned, we reviewed specifically financial schemes investigated from 2010 through 2020. And you will see there were 26 in total over that period. However, as Stuart indicated, 26 out of that number, there were 20 in 2020 alone. Now, it's anyone's guess as to why that is. But we know the year 2020 is of particular interest because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so this increase in schemes may be sheer coincidence, but it's my guess, because of the pandemic, a greater part of the Bahamas' population, like elsewhere in the world, became homebound and were online far more than usual. And it appears to have allowed for greater opportunities for originators of financial schemes as well. And so we see also in this slide, let's go back there, the types of schemes investigated. And you will see that the most prevalent scheme was the pyramid or the multi-level marketing scheme. We have some Ponzi schemes there as well. As you go right around here, you see most of these were pyramid schemes, and we had some Ponzi schemes as well during that period. Now, we noted that the Bahamas experience during 2020 was not unique. You would have heard this from the other speakers, as a matter of fact. And so we just have some excerpts here from articles throughout the region. In fact, the US, Trinidad and Tobago, St. Vincent, of course, the Bahamas, and you can see where these schemes took hold. And all of them, you will note, 2020, straight through. And so the Bahamas took steps to directly address these issues by passing the current Financial and Corporate Service Providers Act of 2020, and it's criminalized Ponzi and bear pyramid schemes. They call them bear pyramid. They have no viable product. And of course, we trust that this legislation also covers other kinds of schemes or related activities. Now, before the FCSPA, I'll refer to the Financial Corporate Service Providers Act as such, before we implemented that at the end of last year, the Commission was not empowered to address fraudulent schemes or scams that we just talked about. Now we are authorized to address fraudulent schemes or scams, and they're prohibited by the FCSPA, and they're called financial schemes. Time does not permit us to go through these definitions. There are quite a number of them, but what is there covers the prevalent schemes we've seen so far. So in very broad strokes, A through D will cover pyramid or multi-level marketing schemes, or those types of schemes. E through G, that covers advanced fee fraud. This phone here, there we go. And H to I, Ponzi schemes. And J, if you'll note at the bottom here, is a catch-all provision. And that, of course, allows us to address the as yet unknown, because as scammers adapt, so must we. And the provisions cover other known schemes, but those are the broad areas. And so the Act further ensures our ability to implement the provisions as well. And so we have the power to enter a premises to inspect or investigate and either obtain or cause the production of documents or material relevant to a financial scheme. And of course, we have there the offense where any person who launches or establishes, and I have highlighted here for your benefit, promotes, markets, or advertises any financial scheme, or invites or recruits any other person to join or participate in any financial scheme, commits an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a fine not exceeding $100,000. So, in answer to our earlier questions, who can be held liable? What are the potential consequences for a person who, whether intentional or not, moves from being scammed or a victim to a scammer? Can such a person be criminally liable? The answer is yes, because where any person who promotes, markets, or advertises a financial scheme, or if the person invites or recruits any person to join or participate in a financial scheme, he or she can be held liable under the Act. So in terms of implementation, as you must have recognized now, the Act is still relatively new and it is currently being utilized, but no convictions as yet. Now, while we think the $100,000 fine, that's US, that's a sufficient deterrent, and the criminal courts can order forfeiture and restitution, we will not know the impact until after a conviction under the Act, and hopefully we'll be able to indicate the impact in the near future. So, as you would have already heard, the best way to avoid schemes or scams, protect yourself. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Anything with guaranteed unrealistic terms compared to what you know goes in the market, it's something you probably shouldn't get yourself involved with as an investor. Be skeptical, apply common sense. If you don't understand it, it's complex, why get into it? Ask questions, ask more questions. Stay away from schemes where you have to recruit people to make money. You may unwittingly, at least in the Bahamas, commit an offense. Beware of pushy salespeople and sales tactics pressuring you to invest now. Get promises in writing. I would say preferably signed by the principal of that scheme. And you would like it to think at that point there'd probably be a genuine scheme if you're going to get it signed, if you bother to even do that. Do your research. That is due diligence. Is the seller registered? Are the phone numbers, are they real? Is there a physical place of business? Are there bad reports about the company? And we would have seen earlier, check news articles. That's something that you should always pay attention to, see what's out there about the particular entity in question. As a savvy investor, be sure you get and check your account statements for your investment accounts. Now, these are just a few things for you to consider. They don't guarantee anything, but the more you question, the greater the likelihood you shield yourself from scams and differentiate them from genuine investments. Even then, you must decide whether a genuine investment is right for you. And so finally, when doing your due diligence, remember to check your regulator's website for registered or unlicensed persons. In the Bahamas, registered and unlicensed persons, they are on our website. And if you have a complaint, it may be made via our website. Just click on the Investor tab, and you see there encircled the complaints. You click on that, and it will take you to the complaints page, which looks like this. And so thank you very much for your attention. And if we have any time, of course, we'll take those questions at the end.
Yes.
Back to you,
Thank
Ellie.
you so much, Grain and Stuart. These three innovations you have heard about are obviously not all that is going on in the region, but we hope gives you a sense of how the Caribbean Working Group members are addressing key issues of investor protection and education to combat financial frauds and scams. Now you will have the third section of the webinar. So it's about messaging and communications, lessons learned in the context of COVID pandemic. As noted in your program, Stuart will be our moderator for this session. He will start with a presentation related to the lessons learned using a video toolbox and then reach out to other members of the group to comment on other aspects of messaging and communication during a pandemic. I am again pleased to present to you Stuart Miller. Stuart?
Thanks so much, Ellie. And thank you again to all the presenters and co-presenters and the 16 jurisdiction member leaders of the IFIE Caribbean Working Group who continue to inspire all of us. I'm changing hats here for a moment, adding some dimensions to my perspectives and moving from the Securities Commission of the Bahamas information to both STB Bahamas and activities and a larger regional perspective of the issues related to communications in the pandemic to help individuals in the region better avoid frauds and scams and also to educate themselves and learn more about strengthening their financial resiliency about smart investing. In this context, I'm going to start out by sharing approaches and learning from using different ways to reach out to the public, not just impacted by the pandemic, but also constituents who may need to hear new messages or express their experiences and learn differently or with different media. It's very important during this pandemic that they share their own insights on what they need to make themselves more financially resilient, financially capable, and smart as investors. We also know audiences need various messages, but also are experiencing receiving them differently. And at the same time, some circumstances may require us all to express them differently. Now, I have a presentation that I am going to attempt to share. I think, if I'm not careful, I'm going to show my age here if I don't get this right. Sorry. But the good thing is that if I'm not able to share it, I think I can still, let me try this and see if this helps. Okay, here we go. Okay. Is that visible for everyone? Okay.
Not yet.
I'm sorry.
I'm not seeing it yet.
I'm sorry, let me try it again.
Yes.
You can see it now?
Yes, now it is.
Wonderful. Thank you for bearing with me for that moment. I'm sorry. You can still see the presentation?
No, I see a Word document.
My apologies. Okay, here we go then.
Yes, now it is on.
Okay, thanks for bearing with me through that. I'm going to get in the presentation. I'm also watching the time because I know that we have some time to make up on this last baton pass. So I think I've already expressed and I think what I'll do, hold on, let me just do this. Sorry, thank you.
Stuart, sorry, I'm seeing your notes as well. So on the other end.
Just a moment.
Maybe it's not the correct view.
Okay, the screen's off. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to
Maybe you can do it in this view as well, Stuart, because this one is okay. It is only that we can see the rest of your slides, so it's not your notes.
All right, thank you, everyone. And I'm sorry about that. We definitely are falling a little behind us. I'll jump into the slide. So video can actually be a very effective means of communication. I think everyone knows that from our our own life experiences. It engages audiences, their visual and auditory senses simultaneously. It allows you to tell stories and connect with audiences in a way that print alone or media or audio alone just don't allow you to do. It can be distracting as well, and it can be an expensive affair. So you need to be careful entering into any considerations for video because of those reasons. Potentially, there are considerable production costs involved, and distribution can be very expensive as well, especially if you're choosing to do traditional channels of distribution like television or cable. The fact is, though, that today everyone has a video camera in their cell phone. There are apps that allow low-cost video production, and social media distribution allows you to access people at cost levels that you simply couldn't before. Key to this discussion also, of course, is the pandemic itself and how it affected where people were, how they were consuming information, the production of videos in person, and of course, due to social distancing and other concerns. In the Bahamas, there are really two approaches we've taken to using video and utilizing video that are somewhat, we think, innovative and ways that we were able to tap into video in manners that were effective for us. The first involves video competitions, where the public gets involved in the production of the videos in a campaign type of setting. The second is a different creature altogether, and that is a little more involved from a production standpoint, but certainly in the Bahamas, we found it to be very effective. And I call this the in their own voice video series approach. So we got our feet wet with video competitions for IOSCO's 2017 World Investor Week, where we launched our first video competition under the theme Invest in You. It targeted youth, and we thought it was a very successful production. I'm very pleased to say that the competition was swept by young female videographers, all high school students. And I was particularly pleased about that because we know that if you reach women often, that's a key demographic that you want to reach with your investor education messages because of the broader impact of that messaging. It was such a success, in fact, that we decided that we would relaunch the concept of video competition, taking some of the lessons that we've learned, which I'm going to get into in a moment, from our first experience, and launching a video competition to a broader group, which we have launched as a part of our World Investor Week activities this year. So what were some of the lessons that we learned in our experiences with video? First, there was the lesson to not underestimate the groundwork that's involved in preparing for these competitions. There are a lot of legal elements that you want to consider. When you go out to the public to produce video, not everyone appreciates things, for example, like intellectual property, and you need to make sure that the details of that are clear and that your protections for your organization are clear as well. So the first time you enter these competitions, appreciate that there will be some time that you need to spend making sure that it works from a legal perspective from you. Another key lesson we've learned is not to have the organization directly judge the competition. Rather, you want to choose independent people who are respected in the community to serve as judges. And that way, the final decisions really don't come you get to credit the decision to people who are experts in the area, and your organization is able to step away from the final decisions of the prize winners. We also learn, and this is really important, that whenever you do these competitions, you should include a people's choice element. And the people's choice element really allows you to harness the social networks of the people who are submitting videos to be a part of your competition. So in addition to your own reach, you then have people who are promoting the competition and driving traffic to your website, driving traffic to wherever you're locating the videos for people to take a preliminary look at. And you can use on that page, of course, your own messaging to allow that to be an avenue to promote your investor education messages. And the last point I'd like to make on this is that, as we've learned, you want to really reserve some of your promotional clout for nearing the end of the submission. You may get a lot of expressions of interest along the way, but of course, as you're getting near to your submission deadlines, that's when you're going to start panicking a bit when you don't actually see people having submitted. You're going to want to have some leeway to be able to really promote during that end period. The other approach I would like to talk about is it's a different creature altogether, and that is the In Their Own Voice series. So let me back up a minute. The fundamental concept behind the In Your Voice video series is that you turn to people in your community who are well regarded and have some accomplishment in the subject area that you want to speak to, and you allow them to speak unscripted in their own voices from their own life experiences. In other words, you find messengers who people can trust and let them tell their story. We launched the first of these video series, How I Did It, a few years back, and we had a very successful experience with it. What we learned coming out of that, and that's coming out of that is fed into the last series which we launched, because we launched a financial resiliency video series at the beginning of September that focused on a different group of people and a slightly different message, really focusing on financial resiliency because, of course, what was happening with the COVID pandemic. Some of the key lessons we've learned from that were to not, again, script the questions, not to script the answers, I'm sorry, but to script the questions. So you want to tell people what you want to talk about. You want to cast a wide net as well when you are sourcing your talent for the actors. Aim big. You'd be surprised who's going to be willing potentially to help and come on board to promote these investor education, these financial capability messages. Cast a wide net and don't be afraid. And most importantly, because trust is the key element, you want a wide net with different people, different voices, different backgrounds, because different people will resonate from a trust perspective with different audiences. The beauty of a video series like this is, again, you get to choose different people, different demographics who you think have the respect to speak to people, gain their attention, and who people will listen to. A few other messages. If you do this, we've learned that if you're able to do it in an interview format, it works best. You end up with a lot of material, and often you can have spontaneous interactions that you don't really get when people prepare their presentations. Although when people prepare their presentations themselves, they tend to be very polished and very to the point. The last, I think, key message, the key lesson that we've learned doing these video series is that we need to be clear about the fact that your organization should hold the final rights to editing and distribution in case the final messages that you get back don't quite align with your brand or where you want to go with your messaging. Okay. So just as I'm wrapping this portion, I'm going to turn to a few colleagues with some questions. If you did want to see any of these videos, you could see them on our website, on the Investor Education Media pages. Our website, of course, www.scb.gov.bs, and also on our Facebook, Instagram, and Instagram sites as well. So that brings me to the end of this discussion, but it allows me to turn to some of my colleagues for some input in these areas. Just a moment.
Anyone else who would like to share their experience?
Yeah.
Lessons learned?
Actually, I'd like to turn to Rhonda, the BVI. Is Rhonda joining us for the call? On the call?
Yes, I am here.
Wonderful,
Stuart.
wonderful. Rhonda, you so Rhonda, let me just say who Rhonda is. I'm sorry, because a lot of you won't know. Rhonda Hodge-Smith is a certified mediator and financial literacy coordinator. Of course, she's she works with the British Virgin Islands Financial Services Commission as the certified media and financial literacy coordinator in the managing director's office. Her programs have been reaching out through social media platforms to reach new and diverse audiences, as well as addressing the financial resiliency and investor education and protection needs of some of those of the BVI. Rhonda, would you like to talk to us about your approach and any key lessons learned communicating with younger audiences and influencers and ways to reach them?
Okay, yes, sure, Stuart. Thank you. Well, the BVI became aware of the Blessing Circle from social media and from persons who've been approached to take part. As explained earlier by Errol, it clearly had the hallmarks of a fraudulent scheme. The FSC's, the BVI Financial Services Commission's approach to this was very wide. First of all, it issued an advisory warning. And next, it turned to Money Matters BVI, which is our financial literacy and financial education program at the Commission, to assist. And what we did was we hosted an e-forum where our guests were persons from the BVI Financial Services Commission, our regulatory body, the BVI Financial Investigation Agency, the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force, and BVI Finance. We also hosted focus groups, and this is where a lot of the young persons had an opportunity to give some input on, they spoke freely about their experience with Ponzi and pyramid schemes and spoke about ways that they felt that they could avoid these schemes, and also offered what they thought would be good official solutions to the problem. And these were divided into groups according to age. They were closed to the public, and so persons were able to speak freely. We also had electronic surveys where 85% of the persons who were approached said they had been approached in relation to a questionable investment, for instance. Very uniquely, almost 30% of the respondents stated that if they had heard about the investment warning, but that the person who recruited them was still a trusted friend, they would still proceed. So we learned a lot from those initiatives. So our approach in general now is a more holistic one, where we promote initiatives that can help to build the ability to be more resilient when hard times come. And our flagship initiative in this respect is our Financial Disaster Management Planner, which would take residents through a variety of scenarios and help them to better understand the financial output that would be necessary to survive a financial challenge. The second one I would highlight would be turning to women as major influencers regarding household budgets. And we did this during International Women's Day to teach them to budget more wisely and how to avoid getting into such a jam where they would need to get quick money, and therefore making fraudulent schemes less attractive. Let's start, back to you. I know time is very limited. You're muted.
The time is limited. It is 3:28. I did have a quick question that I was going to try to ask to TTSEC. Ellen, if you're still available, maybe if you have 2 minutes, how does TTSEC and Caribbean Work Group members really, how do we promote and maintain investor confidence in securities markets during these challenging times? Is that something you can try to address for us in 2 minutes, Ellen?
Well, I will do my best, Stuart. Thank you so much for the question. I think firstly, what we do is collaborate with a financial system regulator, that is the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, Financial Intelligence Unit, and of course, the TTSCC. We collaborate to ensure that on matters of concern to the investor in the market, we communicate to the population as soon as possible. I note that during the presentation of Dwayne earlier, he made reference to, of course, the Bahamas' website and where to go. We also direct and ensure that, that investors and potential investors make reference, first point of reference, our website, where we have a database of all listed registrants who authorize to transact business locally. If it is you're made an offer by an entity and you fail to see that entity's name on the list of registrants, That, of course, is the first red sign, your first marker, your first indicator that something is wrong, or to turn away. Of course, we publish this list annually on our website and, of course, in national newspapers. We also, as well, to promote and maintain confidence in the marketplace. We require our registrants to disclose material changes, to disclose changes to their board and different things. We also conduct what we require, of course, we call fit and proper criteria. And that requires, of course, the qualifications of the persons who are engaging with persons wanting to invest. We also seek to ensure that at all times there's proper and full disclosure. We seek to ensure that there's transparency. We seek to ensure that market participants publish their financial statements. And of course, very importantly for us, particularly as relates to the retail investor, education. Particularly now when market is saturated, all these different options and offerings of a dubious nature. So we are the TTSCC here. We aggressively conduct monthly campaigns. We conduct national campaigns for quarter, and we engage in that in an aggressive and incisive way. And we ensure that we connect as far as we can with the retail public, with the investing public. We also conduct virtual outreach sessions. We meet particular and special stakeholders to address their needs. So other than ensuring that participants conform with the Securities Act, we are obligated, as all the regulators, to promote investor awareness, investor education. We seek to ensure that you do due diligence, you conduct your research, you ask all the appropriate questions that we saw in the presentation from going earlier. And once you do your checks and balances, address your ABCs before you put your hard-earned money into these questionable schemes. This is not a time. It's not a time where persons are losing their jobs, where they're suffering reduced income, where they're uncertain of the future. For you to take the money you currently have in saving, or whether you have it investing in a particular place, to say I'm going to try to spread and try to increase my wealth by going to a dubious transaction. We're entering a period of high spend, which is the Christmas period, and we expect to see a proliferation or increase in these types of offerings to the public. And of course, we have to counteract that. We're prepared to counteract that. One way to do that is, of course, by use of the app. And we want the public to utilize the app to engage with us and tell us this is what is happening. We need to address it, we need to counteract it. And the app will help us, of course, to send out alerts, advise, notices to the public and counteract, combat, and minimize the impact of these dubious offerings that are pervading the market or local market. Stuart?
Thank you. Actually, to kick back to Ellie at this point. Thank you so much, Ellen.
Ellie?
Yes, thank you so much, Stuart, Alan, for your input. We do have other questions, but I think, yes, we have come to an end because it's already 3:33, I see. So any other question that we got, we will be publishing these online together with a link to the webinar. So, and this will be shared then across the region, so for you to check out. So on behalf of the webinar host, Central Bank of Curacao and St. Maarten, I would like to thank you all for joining the webinar in honor of IOSCO's World Investor Week. I also want to thank our IFIE Caribbean Working Group leader members, all 16 of them, for all their hard work and contributions to this webinar and for their efforts every day of the year to educate and protect individuals and strengthen their financial resilience and capability to manage their finances and invest in our markets. And last but not least, I would like to thank our speakers. So thanks to my colleague Errol Cova from the Central Bank of Curacao and St. Maarten. Thanks to Stuart Miller, Wayne Worth of the Securities Commission Bahamas, Alan Lewis of the Trinidad and Tobago Securities, and Alucia Facial of the Eastern Caribbean Securities Regulatory Commission, so ECSRC. I also would like to thank Ms. Rhonda Hodge-Smith of the BVI FSC, who spoke during the last session as well. My name is Ellie Musquit, and I'm saying goodbye from Curacao. So thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye. Bye.
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 Thank you.
Good afternoon.